This is the Jess Scott You show, where we are talking with Kittie Walker today about journalism, about reality TV, and how it is changing our culture. Are you in? First, before you can really be all in, we've got to know a little bit about Kittie.
I'm Kittie Walker from London. I run a digital marketing agency called Avid Mode, and I am absolutely geekish about media, technology, society, and gaming. Let's not forget the gaming.
You know, that perspective of things, it's like, oh, right, geography. Our worlds are so different, not only geographically, but in terms of density and how we live in our cities and what is urban and suburban. Do you guys think that affects how we look at our news?
We're very strange with news consumption, aren't we?
We are.
We are really peculiar. I mean, it used to be that, certainly in the UK, you would grow up and you would watch and read exactly the same publications as your parents did. And you would vote, therefore, for the same parties that your parents did. We still consume most of our news on from the TV or from the regular TV stations, but we delve into different sources for other stories. I think it's quite interesting because we're not quite in the same kind of filter, although with Google personalization, you could probably argue that actually we are in a whole filter of our own, seeing our own echoing bubble the whole time. But I think it is interesting the way that it's changed and the circles that we go in. You hear a piece of news on Twitter and back in the day you'd go, oh, it's a piece of news, let me spread it. And then now you go, oh, it's a piece of news on Twitter. Is that necessarily true? Let me go and check the BBC or the Guardian and see if they're breaking the news on there just to verify. So I think we're not as dumb as the media think we are. We definitely keep tabs on them. I don't think we believe everything we read.
If we can have everything at our fingertips, all we have to know is kind of how to search. Is that enough?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because we do tend to like to read stuff that reflects our views. So, you know, I'm quite socially on the left, so I like The Guardian. I'm very into social justice, so I will read things that I know are going to have my point of view. But then, because I'm me and because I'm quite willful, I'll go and read the opposite because I like to be annoyed. I like to hear what other people are saying and then make an independent decision. But I don't know if everybody does that. I'm not sure.
There's a new phenomenon that's cropped up in the last several years, and that's crowdsourcing or crowdfunding.
Yes. On the crowdfunding side, I also like the sites that are now popping up with independent journalists where you can pay monthly, subscribe to their opinion, and have another view on the world because they're not constrained by the media organisations that own them or pay their living, or think about people like Rupert Murdoch, who obviously we all have an agenda, don't we? Everyone in life has a bias, has an agenda. And I don't think any of the big media moguls could with a straight face say that they're not trying to perpetrate some kind of agenda through their news organisations. So I think it's very important in the crowdsourcing sense of the word that we do now have that opportunity to pay for independent journalists. Because otherwise you're moulded, aren't you?
But now that there are smartphones and that it can be captured on video and that one individual can upload it to YouTube and then it becomes a national story and other people pick it up and they spread it out. So that would be kind of crowdsourcing the story where it's the decision that it's a story isn't necessarily in the hands of the mainstream media. It is now in the hands of individuals and who not only upload it, but then who will then put their eyes on that media rather than the media from the mainstream media. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
It's great in some ways and it's quite sad in others, isn't it? Because if you look at the history of our media and our political systems, in democracy you need a media. You need somebody to reflect our views up to the politicians and the politicians' views down to us. And that hasn't always worked so great. I think there's a huge amount of tension between the three, and there always has been. And we've seen a massive shift over the 20th century from all of us being quite repressed and going along with what the government say, both in terms of the journalists and us, the audience. And then progressively, as we've gone through the 20th century, that's got more and more radical. We've lost our trust in the politicians. Journalists have lost their trust. And in fact, politicians have probably lost their trust in journalism too. So this new route is absolutely fantastic because, yes, you can get the story out there. You don't have the CNN effect anymore, and you certainly don't have, or there's the potential not to have, agenda setting by the mainstream media. But the noise is the problem. And the noise and the volume of just incredible stuff that appears in Google News every day. You just look at it and you think, I'm reading the same story 50 times by different media outlets, because all they are now doing, I mean, the Daily Mail Online, which is one of the biggest news organisations now online, is insane. They have a content farm out of London somewhere where they literally pay people, journalists, to rewrite content from BuzzFeed, from all sorts of other sources, and they just regurgitate this as news. And that drowns out the potential that we have from these amazing citizen journalists that we've now got.
Wow. We put this up online hoping, and I think the sensationalism that comes with that feeling of being sensational and being worthy that comes from this is actually affecting our ability to make decisions. Because what do? We might not make the videos because we have some semblance of what decision we've made for ourselves, yet we go watch everybody else's.
Yeah, no. You're right. And that's the problem with celebrity culture or reality TV, isn't it? We love sensationalism. That's what made newspapers explode through the 18th and 19th and early 20th century. We love to live vicariously through other people's lives. We love to see their trauma. We love to see, their redemption. We love all of these stories. And I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes, although we love to watch it, we don't necessarily want people to think about us as we're thinking about them. So although we'd like to see ourselves reflected in them, because we know we're all, pretty similar, we don't necessarily want the world seeing us making those gaffes. So I think you're right. We definitely censor.
Yeah. What would be the distinction to you when we tend toward, oh, that's so cool, that's so sensational, I can't even believe that, to filling our brains with the actual stuff that we need to be productive citizens in our respective communities and around the globe?
I think that's really tricky, really, really tricky. And I think that we call a lot of stuff journalism that isn't journalism. Even on mainstream media, there's reporting, and you think, really? You're telling me that's news? I think it's really difficult. I think we have to be very picky. We have to critically analyse what we're watching. We have to think about what the agenda is behind it, what the bias is of the channel that we're watching. And you have to go out of your way to read people who believe in the opposite that you do. You really do. Because Google personalises for us, doesn't it? It knows what we like to watch or who we like to read. So it will say to us, oh, look, here's some lovely new articles. And they're going to completely put you in an echo chamber. So I think you have to think really hard about it. And I'm not sure that we've quite got that far down the line yet, because we're so excited that everything's so easy, isn't it? We don't have to think. They deliver me the news. I don't have to go searching for it.
There's just this massive shift to lacking the ability to sift through that information and make a logical decision and go, there might be more, or that's not for me, or wow, maybe I should spend my time elsewhere.
How do you approach it?
That's a really good question. We watch about an hour of TV or a show together every night in our house. Ryan and I. Carter's not there yet. We very much limit his access still to screens and information and stuff like that. I don't want to say we're a control freak, but we're screen frenzied people, right? We're worried about the effect of screens on Carter. So because we are for him, it actually then shifted us again. Wow, maybe we should be that way too. Yet Ryan and I both use the computer every single day. We are gathering our information from people we subscribe to, things that we find interesting, and we kind of avoid the stuff we're not quite sure or is going to take too much work to figure out.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I have a really good answer except for possibly avoidance.
Yeah. But it's easier to avoid, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, is it easy to avoid?
What about you, Scott? I mean, you come from a fascinating background as far as TV and media is concerned.
For early on, that had just amazed me is that I'd be listening to folks and they'd say, I make up my own mind. I listen to the radio, I watch the TV, but at the end of the day, I don't let those stories influence me. I make up my own mind. And I just know that, first of all, anyone watching the media, they only have a limited playing field upon which they can see. So they're only choosing from a finite amount of information to begin with. And then there's the power of advertising. There's just the power of a point of view. There's no such thing as objective news because you always have underlying it. In my personal opinion, and I'd like your comments on this, Kittie, you have assumptions that are already there. And so with mainstream media, those reporters that reinforced what management liked, they would just naturally be promoted. And those who were loose cannons, it isn't that they were fired, it's just that they kind of went off onto small markets and their impact in the world was a lot less than that. So there is just kind of a monolithic or homogeneous society that I grew up in, and now the internet and multiple many-to-many as opposed to one-to-many communications has just blown the lid off of that. I've got about 3 or 4 things that I've thrown out there. Pick 1 or 2 of them, and could you comment on it, please?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, I come from a media family background as well. My mum worked for the Daily Mail, so I've been immersed in it since I was very, very small. And I agree with you. You see the news, and we do make assumptions. If I watch the news when I go to another country, so say India or somewhere like that, I don't get the cultural assumptions behind that broadcast. I really don't. So absolutely, people who rise through the media tend to be from a particular mould. Traditionally here, news media tends to be public school boys. They've all gone to school together, they've all gone to school with the same politicians, they're of a particular class. So of course, even if they believe that they're unbiased and that they're giving us a balanced view, or they have to give us a balanced view, it can't be, because that's not how we work as humans. There's a set of assumptions behind everything that we read and watch and consume. And we're in the know in the country that we live in. So we don't even notice it because they are so inbred within our culture. We don't even notice it. It's subliminal. And not in a controversial conspiracy theory kind of way.
But it is, speaking to the culture of that does create, though, an us and them type of mentality, which is why we end up with a lot of different viewpoints in a lot of these different areas that people are willing to adopt, to, even though they've risen up together, to take these different viewpoints to fulfill the role of the need of bringing the information up and down through a perspective that we choose to want to engage with.
Yeah, no, and I think the political system is a massive reflection of that, isn't it? Because from the 70s through the 90s, everything kind of met in the middle. I don't know if you're the same in the States, but it seems to be. There's not much between the main parties. They all they're neither socialists nor completely right-wing anymore. And now you get people coming up like the Tea Party or UKIP in the United Kingdom, and then the SNP up in Scotland, who are very, very far left. And they're springing up, I think, because culturally there was a status quo, and it wasn't working. And so now we're getting people coming, and whether that's because it's spread via the internet, whether they probably did get more voice originally from people finding them in that way, because they certainly weren't in the mainstream media, their views to start with. Nigel Farage from UKIP, who is the most amazing politician. I would never vote for him ever, but he has certainly changed the landscape of UK politics over the last 18 months or so. And everyone knew his name because we used to watch him on YouTube in the European Parliament. He was a member of the European Parliament. So his views came under the radar into our perceptions that way. So yeah, you know, it is working. But my concern is slightly that, like we thought the internet was going to be the brave new world, and it's this idealistic version of society where we all play nicely with each other and we all share views, and you know, everything's going to be amazing. This is the perfect world, utopia, here we come. I do worry that there's too much noise, and unless we proactively go out to find stuff, it will just become even more homogenized.
Okay, so is that like a hierarchy? Do we have a hierarchy of information that's getting a little bit out of wonk, and eventually it will fall and something else will replace it?
I think so. I think if you look at a long enough period in media or culture, that it's an ongoing cycle, isn't it? Yeah. We have these new fears about new technologies that come in, and then they become the norm. We domesticate them and they become extensions of us, and we don't even think about it anymore. And then the next thing comes on and that changes us up, and then we evolve and we move on. I think that's just the rise and fall of humanity, isn't it?
Yeah. We're talking about ways of looking at things, and a little bit earlier we talked about crowdsourcing, and there's another phrase that's come to kind of describe maybe what you're talking about, and it's not that it's new, but it's a new word, at least for me, and that would be disruptive technology. And so I'd like to put that into play in terms of our conversation, but also add maybe a little bit of spice to this, and talk a little bit about disruptive technology and what we came to know as the Arab Spring.
Yeah. Oh, blimey. Disruptive technology. It's not a new concept, is it? Look at the telegraph. Look at how Napoleon used the system to steal the march. Then you had radio, and you had the politics of the early 20th century being run because all of a sudden people had these voices in their houses that were telling women how to run a household that they'd never had before. You know, we've always had these disruptive technologies, and I don't think there's anything new about that. I think there was a massive hope around Twitter and social media for the Arab Spring, and I think it gave people a lot of hope that they could make change. But I think it's patently obvious, if there's no support there from outside to help them make that change and keep it, it doesn't work, does it? Look what's happened. Such hope. And are people going to try that again in the near future? No.
For those of you just joining in, this is the Jess plus Scott plus You show, where we are talking journalism, we are talking reality TV, and we are talking cultural changes with Kittie Walker.
Just the spread of information so quickly from person to person is something new.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had riots here a few years ago, and it doesn't happen very often. I think the last major set before that was the race riots in the 1980s. And those riots were organised via social media. It was instant. They just sprang up because people were connected on their Blackberries, they were connected via Twitter. And absolutely, it's instantaneous. Flash mobs are a more innocuous version of that, aren't they? So yeah, I think technology is just making our lives faster and faster. So at some point, it's going to be instantaneous. I mean, look at Amazon, for instance, who want to deliver everything to us within an hour. They're testing their drones here at the moment. So everything's becoming faster and faster, but there's something lost, isn't there? I think there's something very lost as well in.
There'll be a shift back.
Yeah,
I
think
really
they'll
think there
have.
will be.
I think they'll have to be, because especially with media, it's all very well it being instant, but there's no reflection.
We're only receiving, and there is no pondering, no ability to understand how that affects me personally before the next thing comes. How do we show up in our world, and how can we actually be global citizens when we are really not able to respond?
Absolutely, and the people who are disseminating the information to us, they're under equal pressure. They don't have the time to question what they're writing. They don't necessarily have the time to... She's had a thought.
Keep going, I'm agreeing.
But the politicians are the same. They don't have the time to think about how they're reacting. So I think there will have to be some kind of plateau where we all step back and go, okay, we need to start reflecting. There's too much misinformation. Because we're terrible, aren't we, as a society? We love to jump to the wrong conclusions. We read between the lines. And if that's happening, supposedly factual information that's being passed to us, how can we make informed decisions as citizens?
And in our lives at home. And then, of course, that inundation in that way reflects what we do, role in our job as well. And then it, of course, percolates up through a company and makes a pretty dysfunctional company, because they're losing the opportunity and the time to also reflect, which means they're not serving their customers as well, which is a whole other facet of what we're talking about that I do, might be bold of me to say this, but I think it starts with the media and how we receive and interview the world. Right, we're not even questioning, so how can we interview? But being pummeled with this information that we then have to somehow do something with, it's a really hard place to be.
It's really hard, and I think probably you and I can both see it in our daily lives. I don't know. I mean, you're a strategist as well. How many times have you been on a client call when you're talking about really quite deep strategy, and it's the first time that that thread has come up, and the person on the other side of the call wants you to make an instant decision about what the pivot in strategy should be? If you're silent for more than a couple of seconds, they're like, are you there? What do you think we should do? And you're like, yeah, reflection. And we are doing, it's happening more and more.
A moment or a minute or even an hour of reflection, most likely and in those cases I'm like, well, maybe the strategy doesn't need to pivot. Let's think. Can we think?
Yeah, no.
I'm going to totally switch gears here, because I'm looking at myself as a parent. And how long does it take a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 2-year-old to process what's told to them? After Carter says something to me that really surprises me, when I want to react, I count to 7, because that actually happens to be a number I read of how many seconds it takes a little person to get the information, get it through their brain, process what it means to be able to take action. Now, is that coincidence that at one point in time we were making decisions about people in 7 seconds? I have no idea if there's a correlation or not. And now we're not even allowing a full 7 seconds before our filters are going. And is that detrimental to us on so many levels? I don't know. It's just interesting pondering.
If you look at the Obama social media campaign when he was elected the first time, that was based on the fact that as human beings on social media, we build trust with people much quicker than we do in person, or through the TV or whatever. It's fostered that ability in us to make connections a lot faster, and all politicians are now using that. So that those reflections, even for bigger decisions, have started to vanish, because there's no way you should be making a political decision or an informed decision in that amount of time and giving your trust over to anybody without due reflection. And we're doing it more and more. So I like your counting to 7. I might institute that for myself.
I mean, I'm like, okay. And it's really hard. It's really funny. I told another parent that recently, and they were like, you what? I'm like, I know. I'm checking my response. What do you think about that, Scott?
Are we evolving higher than ourselves socially, or are we just, That's my question. Kitty?
I think we're enriching ourselves amazingly by being able to interact with all sorts of different cultures and communicate in ways that we've never been able to do before. I think that's absolutely amazing. But I do think it also brings out the worst in us. I mean, you look at things like Gamergate, you look at things like somebody making, I mean, I've never had it happen to me before, but I made a statement about a radio personality that I like to listen to. And he's not too controversial, you know, he's a little bit to the left, and he's kind of, you know, very social justicey. And I made a comment about it. And about 2 weeks ago, and that was 3 weeks after I'd made the comment on Twitter, this guy out of nowhere came and attacked me, calling me all sorts of names. How dare she like this person? Look at this. And it was really, really vile. He got really, really nasty. And then he started telling me things like, oh, don't you worry, Nigel Farage of UKIP will look after you, love. And I was like, oh my God. And that's when you think, yes, there are some amazing benefits, but also I think it's bringing out the worst in us. I mean, why would you make a death, not to me, but why would you make a death threat to somebody over Twitter?
Right.
What are you even thinking? What happened to freedom of expression? I agree that you should think carefully, be nice, don't be offensive intentionally. Obviously hold your own views, but you don't need to do that in a nasty way, but also you don't need to then go and attack people for their views.
Well, think about all of those milestones that we grow through growing up. And one of the rites of passage is the first time we feel shame. And another one is the first time our heart is broken. And another one is the first time we feel deserted. And our society does not talk about those feelings. So not only do we not know how necessarily it takes, I mean, I'm speaking in general, I'm not speaking to the specific. How do we, if our society does not know how to process those emotions and kind of refuses to allow them to exist, yet we still have meanness. It makes me wonder, what is the connection between how we're receiving information, the models that we have going before us, and even though those feelings will still be there, if they were met with love, and if the feelings were, oh, I am ashamed of that, and you had somebody standing with you going, yeah, I think if that happened to me, I would be too. I'm here with you while you're having this feeling. Would that change our attribute? Would that little bit of love, that little bit of witnessing, that little bit of just standing arm in arm,
I think it might do.
Benefit? You think so?
I thanked that guy for his advice. That's all I did. I didn't react. I just said, thanks a lot for your advice. I'll check it out, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't return hate, if you don't return those feelings, because hate, it comes from, well, fear mainly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And if we can break down some of those barriers, and I think that's where reality TV actually hasn't been such a bad thing, and soap operas haven't been such a bad thing, because they have actually approached topics that we don't like to talk about as a culture. And it's brought it into the living room, and it's got people talking about stuff. So I think in some ways we've moved a long way through entertainment. But absolutely, we need more love. We need more love.
More love.
Well, I'm also wondering what role anonymity plays, because if you're anonymous, then you can have, on the one hand, no shame. On the other hand, you cannot express love. I don't know how accurate that is, but I thought it might sound good.
You're awesome. You're awesome, Scott.
I think anonymity absolutely does allow people to say and do things they wouldn't necessarily do. I think anonymity might also actually allow them to feel love maybe where they didn't, possibly, if they were open to it. It's all about being open, isn't it? It's like learning in any capacity. You have to be open to those feelings. But yeah, anonymity is a problem, isn't it? I don't think I do anything anonymously on the internet.
I don't. So, we're coming back to choice. Are we going to choose to be open? Are we going to choose to think about what's coming? Are we going to choose to stop, even if it's just for 7 seconds? Are we going to receive somebody else's statement in our perception and be accepting of it without being reactionary. And I'm hearing decision, 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 and the ability to just own an emotion almost, and the decision of that. So let's go back to the JSY theme, the supreme unselfishness and putting yourself first. Out of this conversation that we've had so far, how does everything we've talked about relate to that theme? I'm curious what Scott and Kittie, your takes are on that.
What do you think, Scott?
That's a big question. It requires at least 7 seconds worth of reflection, Jess.
Okay.
I think it's the most selfless thing that you can do, putting yourself out there in all your, I loathe to say it this way, in all your naked glory as a person. You know, you put yourself out there, you put your views out there. People often say to me, I'll say, oh, I reacted this way to that, and I said this, and I said that. And they'll say, you didn't say that in public, did you? It's like kids. It's like when your kids are embarrassed. Yeah, I say things because that's who I am. I don't pretend to be somebody I'm not. I want the world to know me for who I am, in whichever guise I might be at that particular moment. So I think it's really unselfish, participating and putting yourself out there. Does that?
Yes. It does. All right, Scott, do you need a few more seconds?
No, I've got it. And
it's fine.
What?
I was just going to put some filler in there.
That's so nice of you, Jess. We get along so well. Kittie, I just want to go be public, Kittie, that Jess is such a great on-air partner, and otherwise as well. But because
I remember your very first interaction on air.
No.
I do. I do. I watched it.
So
you did?
On Ray's show?
Yeah.
You're talking about Ray's show?
Okay. That is so interesting. And so at the end of the show, what did you come away with? Jess, hang on. Jess 1, Scott 0?
No. I actually thought you made a great team right from the start. I love I don't know what, there's something about you two that really do make, the chemistry is really cool.
Well,
thank you. Thank
you. It's
yes.
a lot of fun.
It
so
is
what I was going to say is that our theme is so ripe this season because it's so contradictory. One of the most selfish things that you can do is to say, I don't care. I don't give a heck what you think about me. I'm just going to be myself. I'm going to say whatever I want to do, and to heck with you. Okay, so that's being selfish. But then what you were saying, Kittie, is for one of the most selfless things that you can do is to be vulnerable, to put yourself out, to say something that might or might not be popular, and let the chips fall where they may. So the same components are both selfish and selfless at the same time. That, I think, was my takeaway.
Oh, that's awesome. And I would say be selfish. Take whatever time you need to make a decision. Learn how to make decisions.
Yeah.
And then be willing to and this is almost like a little bit of a boundary thing. Be willing to put that stake in the sand and say that, well, this is where I'm at, and I'm not ready for that, or I am so ready for that, I can't wait, let's go. And and knowing that in ourselves, because I love everything that you were saying, Kittie, about being able to just be who we are, and the openness of that, and that also comes from a selfish place of owning who we are, which is a whole other conversation that we could. Are we comfortable enough with ourselves to really show people that and make the decision and reflect on the fact, what would it be? What if I just did that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't make connections, can you? You can't share your experiences. You can't help others to gain from your experiences unless you're willing to do that. But always with mindfulness.
Yes.
And coming from the right place, obviously. You know, if it's coming out of hate or it's coming out of fear, then that's not constructive at all. So that's where your 7 seconds of not saying a word come in. Deep breath, walk away, come back.
Yeah, here we are talking about some amazing concepts and ideas. And I want to let this sink in A little bit more for you and a little bit more for us. We will be right back after the shout about for our closing thoughts.
1, 2, 3, 4, get my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great. 9, gonna shine, life is good. I'm doing fine. 10, gonna do it right and do it again, yeah. I look into the sky with all the beautiful color, but the
solution. When you hear that word, what do you think of? What's that first idea? Is it you? It could be. In fact, I know it is. You are a solution. So how do you be that solution that is inherently inside of you? There's a creativity part, there's a resourcefulness part, and then there's the value part. So let's talk about creativity. Because I have to tell you, if you ask me to draw something and be creative, nah, I can't draw anything. But if you give me a pile of stuff and say, make me a bike out of this, I could probably come up with a way to formulate a pile of random art things into some semblance of a bike, or a hot air balloon, or a ray gun, just in case we have ghosts or anything like that around. The idea, though, is we're all creative in our own way. So your creativity is going to be very different than my creativity, and how that manifests and comes out into the world is also going to be different. It comes down to the way we problem solve. And our ability to problem solve comes from the resources that were available to us and how we used those resources. And was it easy for us or hard for us? Did we have to make difficult decisions or time-constrained decisions? And whatever that happens to be in this world of inundation and demands for everything that we have, when we shelter that and hold it, that's resourcefulness. And how we use the information and hold it close, how we guard against giving away too much of our energy so that we can continue to learn and grow, actually can be a stimulus for our creativity, so we can actually be a lot creative or a little creative, or maybe there'll be periods of time where our creativity is completely dry. It's not gone, just dried up for a little while because we're a little bit out of balance. What does that have to do with value, which is what I said at the beginning? Creativity and resourcefulness create value. They do, and they create value in your own personal value equation. Giving plus receiving equals value. So how you mix and match the giving and the receiving, which is made up of partly creativity and resourcefulness, you are creating value. And by continuing to build on ideas, continuing those conversations, you are adding to the idea. You are creating an awareness of that other people can find what you're saying to help them spark ideas to keep on going to the next level or to solve an immediate need that they have. Now, when I talk about be a solution, this quote from Lily Tomlin comes up over and over and over again, so I'm going to share it with you. I always wanted to be somebody, but now I realize I should have been more specific. How will you become a solution?
like I won $1 million, like a kid to pay dirt. Gonna smile from ear to ear, the kind that makes your face hurt. And we'll laugh, jump, sing loud, not afraid to shout about being happy, living it out. Take a look and see a beautiful.
Thinking about everything we've talked about in terms of journalism, reality TV, how that changes our culture, and how many other things come into that. We just came back from the +2 takeaway, and now that we've had a chance to think about it, even it was a little longer than 7 seconds, but a little longer than 7 seconds. What would be your closing thought for today's show?
I think there isn't a crisis. I think we all love to say and see headlines that say this is dead, that terrible thing's happening, we're in crisis. I don't think we're in crisis. I think we're evolving, and I think we're learning how to deal with a new world and a new global set of cultures that we live in now. And I don't think it's something to be scared of, and I just think that we need to be a little bit more mindful about where we're getting our information, think about why they're giving you that information, and double check it. I think those are my thoughts.
There you have it, everybody. This concludes another episode of the Jess plus Scott plus You show. Now, right before I do my closing comments, Kittie, where can we find you online?
Oh, I'm all over the place. I'm Kittie Walker on Facebook. I am Avid Mode on Twitter, and I blog occasionally at avidmode.com.
This is the Jess plus Scott plus You Season 2, the supreme unselfishness of putting yourself first. Thoughtful conversations with people like Kittie about the fact we are not in the state of crisis. We just need that 7 seconds for a little bit of mindfulness and reflection to get passionate about what we're doing in our personal and business lives. Grow, learn, share your comments with us, keep this conversation going, and share it with somebody who would benefit from it right now. Thank you to Scott from the Scott Treatment, which businesses capture the potential and power of video through post-production. And I'm Jess Dewell, working with business leaders that want to be so far ahead in their industry that they're setting the standard. Let's connect at jessicadewell.com. Don't forget, subscribe to the Jess plus Scott plus You YouTube channel so that you are up to date and notified of every show that we do. Thank you for watching. See you next time.